All righty. Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's presentation of the Cold Creek Canyon SkyWatchers. As usual, we're doing something a little different this time, just to see if we can come up with something to mess us up. So what we'll be doing is just a couple quick little intro kinds of things. And then Dr. Stern will give his presentation on his computer. And then after that goes perfectly, then there'll be a brief pause as we switch over to our regular presentation computer for the other presentations that are going. So first, Barb's going to say a few things, and then Carol's going to say a couple things about Star Party stuff, and then it will be Dr. Stern's turn.
Yeah.
All right, what you got there, Barbara?
Yeah. So first, I'm going to hand out some sky calendars. We passed some of these out at 4th of July, so that's why they say at the top that our next meeting is tonight. And our next meeting will be August 17th here, same place, with Robert Zubrin, who's president of the Mars Society, and he's going to be talking about his book, The New World on Mars, What We Can Create. And he'll be selling his book and signing it. So hope we'll have a few buyers. And then my neighbor has 2 telescopes. I'm going to pass these around. I didn't get in touch with her before tonight, so I'm not sure what she wants for them, or she may even be just looking for a good home. So let me pass these around, and if you're interested in the telescope, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with her. And we want to thank our sponsors, the Cold Creek Canyon Park and Rec, and Carol is going to be talking in a few minutes about August 10th event, the Astro Day at Gilpin County at the Gilpin County Community Center, right? Also, right here, the Park and Rec are doing their annual fundraiser called Mountain Fest, where they crown a couple of people who can do all these different little things, load firewood into wheelbarrow, and jump over things, and I don't know. It's really fun though. It's almost, last year it was almost like our 4th of July. A lot of people here. They also did the chicken poop contest where people sign up for different squares, and then they put a chicken in a little thing, and then wherever it poops, you get all the money, or half the money maybe. And then tonight, we have at 9:13, 11 degrees is the space station flying over, but we think it's probably going to be too cloudy. It will probably be in that area. And then if you want to stay really late till 10:49, it's at 24 degrees if it's clear. And you're welcome to stay that long if you want. And I think that's about all. Happy Apollo 11 55th anniversary. You'll hear more about that. And Carolyn, do you want to come up, and do you want her over here? Yeah, you can come around here. Let's start ready.
Yeah, so I'm president of the Friends of Gilpin County Community Center. It's a charitable organization that we do to support the community center, and we're having 2 star parties. One of them is next Friday at the we'll start out with a talk at the Reverend Ridge Campground over in Golden Gate State Park, and then we'll go over. I talk for about an hour. We take questions, and then when it's good and dark, we go up to Panorama Point. So any of you who want to come to that, you're certainly welcome to do it. I can always use more people helping answer questions, because last year I ended up with 200 people, and it was pretty hard to yell over all that. So anybody who wants to come and help people find the North Star, that's great. That'd be good. And then on August 10th, we're sponsoring, along with the Alan Green Memorial Foundation and United Power, something called Gilpin Astro Day. And what I'm looking for there, well, I'll tell you the events. The events are where the Fisk Planetarium is sending up their inflatable planetarium. They're going to be doing shows every half hour, so you're welcome to come and see those, bring the kids or the grandkids. And then I'm looking for speakers that afternoon just to come and give some informal talks about astronomy and planetary science and all that. So if you want to do that, contact me. My email address is cc.petersen@gmail.com. And then that evening, we'll go and do another star party at Golden Gate State Park. So this is sort of a thing I wanted to do. We've done star parties before and people really liked it. And then I was talking to the guys at Fisk and they said, well, we have an inflatable, should we bring it up? And so we arranged to do that. So they'll give like 30-minute talks on what's up tonight. And then if anybody wants to come and share their research or their talk with a very, very general audience, that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'll be giving a talk about solar activity. And then anybody that wants to talk about something else is welcome to come and do it. But get in touch with me if you'd like to do it. Thank you.
All right, and before we move on, I'm just gonna do one quick check from people at home Zooming. Can you hear everything okay?
Yes, indeed.
Great, thank you. Just need to check it. And now I'm going to introduce the person who's going to do the introduction. So here's the person who needs no introduction, Leonard Davis.
Well, okay, I'm just gonna, it's one of those, this guy doesn't need an introduction. So why am I here? No, Alan is just an amazing talent, lucky to have him come up and also to be his friends for so many years. I don't know when we met. I don't know what it was, where, I just remember a Mexican restaurant, that's all I remember.
For space week.
Yeah, probably way back. But, you know, somebody that has really gone beyond the principal investigator that he is at Southwest Research Institute to actually go into space, fly in the Virgin Galactic suborbital space plane, but also the incredible tenacity to and the audacity to go to Pluto and beyond, and it's still going. So that's an incredible achievement. And he's still such a young man. So God knows what's coming next. But with that, I think, Alan, you can dive right into this because is anybody else flown to suborbital space? There'll be no challenging things. So with that, Alan Stern is just a talent. I'm so happy that he could come up and share his experience with us. Quite a career and still more to go. Thanks. Alan.
Thank you, Leonard. Yeah. Hi, everybody at home. I got people here. Couple things where I start. First of all, thank you for the very nice introduction and for the invitation to come back here. I don't know how many times over the years I lived in the Boulder area. I've spoken at least 4 times.
Yeah.
About different things every time. You'll notice I have a cough lozenge in my mouth. I woke up this morning with a tickle in the back of my throat, and it got worse all day long. And I'm pretty much living on these calls. So I hope I can make it through this talk. The good news is I feel really well. I don't feel like I have anything except a sore throat and a little sniffly, but the antihistamines will help with that. That's a picture of myself over the Earth last November on my first space flight. And it's the best work day I ever had. Hands down. And I'm going to tell you a little about that, why I think it's about something really game changing. Not only as an experience for me, I mean about researchers flying in space. And I'll give you some background in case you don't know much about the suborbital game. So I thought I'd start and just tell you that this is about commercial spaceflight, not government spaceflight. Actually, on the previous slide, I left one thing out. After my name, it's got that funny acronym, SwRI. This does not stand for science while really intoxicated. Or it doesn't stand for the Scotch Whiskey Research Institute either, although there is. I learned. It's a nonprofit. It was started in Texas in the 1940s. Bob and I both worked there. There are about 3,000 employees. The firm does about $900 million a year in contract research. A lot of it for the federal government, agencies like NASA, some national security agencies, Department of Energy, and a lot of it for private industry, oil and gas and automated vehicles and things like that. There are a little over 100 of us in a single office building in Boulder, mostly doing planetary science. And Bob and I are both in that group. So that's what SwRI is. And as my employer, this whole thing is possible because the firm was farsighted and was willing to stick with something which took a long time to do. So it's all about commercial space flight. When most people in this room grew up, space flight was all about superpowers competing with one another, and projects took thousands and tens of thousands, and in the case of Apollo, literally hundreds of thousands of people. While you weren't watching over the last 50 years, the technology greatly advanced. I mean, think of it. The computing power of the entire United States in the 60s is less than you're wearing on your belt in a single iPhone. And they did all of Apollo without tools like little yellow sticky pads. I don't know how they did space. But as time has gone by, we have better tools. And now individual companies can do formerly what only superpower nations could do. And that's opened up space flight in many ways. I'm only going to talk about one of those, and that's commercial suborbital space flight. Now, I've come here and talked about a couple of different aspects of my career as a planetary scientist. I've been on 30 NASA and European Space Agency mission teams, 29 of which have flown, one of which is supposed to launch in October, the Europa Clipper. I'm lucky enough to have been PI on 15 of those 30 missions. Of all those, the one that's probably best known, especially this group, because I came here and talked about it, is the one Leonard referred to, which is New Horizons, which is $1 billion mission. That was the first to explore Pluto and the Kuiper Belt. And this is kind of a cartoon version of what we've done. Fly out to the Kuiper Belt and go exploring. And we really revolutionized our knowledge, not just of Pluto system and Kuiper Belt objects, but really the whole class of objects called dwarf planets, small planets that the solar system made a lot of. This is the Pluto-Charon binary, the one that we flew very close to in 2015. And those of you who know me probably know me as a planetary scientist. But even though I started off as a kid interested in science, I really was much more interested in space exploration from the beginning. I was a little kid during Apollo, and the earliest moon landings that were robotic in support of Apollo, and the earliest missions to Mars and Venus and so forth by robotic spacecraft. And that just swept me off my feet. And all I wanted to do was grow up and get to be a part of that. But I thought the coolest thing you could do in space flight is to go fly in space. And I watched movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey and dreamed about this far future year of 2001, and where people were apparently going to be flying everywhere. Lots of people, right? We would have moon bases and giant space stations and Pan Am space clippers and all that, and watch Star Trek and so forth. And I thought, well, it's going to be pretty easy by the time I grow up to fly in space. And I was completely wrong, because after Apollo, space took kind of a 40-year detour to nowhere before commercial space came and really revolutionized it. We did a lot of good things during those 40 years, but frankly, the pace was nothing like what people expected in the 1960s. Where we got to by 2001 was not even a shadow of what was portrayed in that movie. So all that is prefaced to say that when I was growing up and hoping to be in the space industry, what I really wanted to do was fly in space. And I tried to craft my resume to be an NASA astronaut. And that was at that time, really the only way to fly in space. A very tough game because tens of thousands of very highly qualified people apply and they'll select 9. And so, 1% of 10,000 is still 100. And I took the right degrees and did some other things in my career to get close, but I never got selected. And I kept thinking of more ways that I could make myself attractive to NASA and maybe get selected. So I spent 5 years flying these F-18 Hornets in the late 90s and early 2000s as a backseater out of Edwards Air Force Base doing research astronomy missions with these airplanes. In fact, there are a couple of pictures from that day. I remember once that Carolyn Porco, some of you may know her, pretty well-known planetary scientist, she was working for us at Southwest Research. And she came to me and she said, when you fly those missions real high in that F-18, is the sky already black? I said, absolutely, Carolyn, because to do astronomy, we have to do it at night. Carolyn really did it like that. I did a research expedition to the South Pole back in the 1990s, calibrated telescope down there. I've done a bunch of other things that are sort of related. I came here and talked last year about an expedition to the Titanic. And all those things helped. And I got to Houston and went through all the psychological and medical exams, found out that I'm very healthy and reasonably well adjusted, but no cigar, didn't get selected. And it's a very tough game, or at least it was, because NASA would try to select a population with many constraints on it. Certain people have to be military, gender balance, trying to have a lot of ethnic diversity and other kinds of diversity. And for whatever reason, I kept getting close, but not quite. And then commercial spaceflight started to come along. It actually started over 20 years ago for human spaceflight. And I saw that as an opportunity where there were other channels to get to space than just flying with NASA. Now, before I talk about how Southwest Research got in this and then my spaceflight, I also want to talk about something very important. And this is the part where you can learn a little something that you may not have thought about. Spaceflight for researchers is a really weird experience, because for space researchers, we don't get to go to space. And that's because it's so expensive. And because our capabilities are so primitive that there's very little capacity, or in the past, historically, to fly humans in space. And so ever since the Cold War in the 1950s and 60s, space science, whether it's missions to the planets or missions that look at our Earth or missions that study the universe like the Hubble Space Telescope, they're all robots. We could not afford to put the people on those. And as a space researcher, you really operate very differently than researchers in almost every field, because you operate from mission control. Now, most chemists go to a chemical laboratory and do their work. Physicists go to particle accelerators and other kinds of experimental gear, and they are in the game, in the lab, doing their stuff. They're not working from some mission control. Geoscientists work from all over the Earth. They go on field expeditions and actually collect data. Sometimes they even go to pretty dangerous places, like on submersibles deep in the ocean, or volcanologists who go right up to active volcanoes and do their work. Or they go to Antarctica, which is a pretty harsh environment. So these may not be quite as harsh as space, but they're dangerous environments, just like space is a dangerous environment. But we just didn't have the capability to fly people in space. So space science was always in this weird cul-de-sac. Every one of us, with very rare exception, had to learn to do things by remote control. Either we would literally be driving the telescope or the spacecraft by computer commands or maybe if you're lucky, so like a Nintendo game, or you had to train somebody else, an NASA astronaut, to do your experiment. That didn't always work out so well. You know, I like to say this: if robotics and automation were so great, every lab would be automated in every university. Every ocean expedition would be a robot ship. Every geology field expedition would have robot rovers, right? But you don't see that because it's actually not the right way to go with our current technology. Humans in the loop solve all kinds of problems. They make things much less expensive than the robots. And the automation is very failure prone, and it's very expensive to do. Fortunately, change is coming. The access to space is exploding to put humans in space. We see humans going to orbit on commercial spacecraft, and what I'm going to talk about, which is humans flying on suborbital flights, meaning they go up and they come right back down. In the case of my space flight, 75 minutes, launch to landing. So you do go to space altitudes, you could do real research, but we don't go into orbit and stay there. Now, there are commercial channels for that, and even commercial space stations are going to be online at the end of the decade. But I'm only going to talk about the suborbital. And there really are only two companies that are doing this. One of them flies rockets. You see it on the left. That's Blue Origin. The other flies space planes. That's Virgin Galactic. Now, how this got its start was way back at the turn of the century in 2000. A guy named Peter Diamandis raised enough money to put a prize together in the private sector called the X Prize. And it was a $10 million purse for the first corporation to fly a human being to space on a reusable spacecraft that could fly at least 2 space flights in the space of a week with humans aboard. And 30 teams entered the fray. One came out far and ahead on top, and that was Burt Rutan's team. And they built something they called Spaceship One, and you see it right here. It consists of a carrier aircraft with a little suborbital spacecraft slung under it, a lot like the old X vehicles that used to fly, like the X-15 slung under the wing of a B-52 bomber. And they actually built this for about $30 million, went through a full flight test program, and won that X Prize in 2004. In fact, they won it on October the 4th, 2004. They picked that date because of its historical import in space exploration. Some of you might recognize October 4th. It's the day the first satellite was launched by the Soviet Union, in fact, back in 1957. But as soon as they made this X Prize and they won the purse for it, people started thinking about commercializing this. Richard Branson, in particular, noticed that every time they would do a test flight out in the Mojave, thousands and eventually tens of thousands of people were showing up to be at these events. And he realized there's a market in this. And it's going to be expensive, but there's going to be a form of tourism we could do with these vehicles, give people brief flights into space. And so he formed a company within the Virgin Group with the understated name Virgin Galactic. And they bought all the IP and all of the rights to the designs of Spaceship One, the carrier and the spacecraft, and their propulsion system. And then started work with the same guy, Burt Rutan, and his firm to build a much larger version to carry tourists into space. They originally thought it would take about 5 years, and by the late 2000s, 2008, 9, they would be flying tourist flights. It took a lot longer than that, but they ultimately did build this system. It took about $1 billion to do it. This is the second generation system, which is called Spaceship Two, not very imaginatively, right? And you can see the carrier, and then slung under the wing is the spacecraft. So the carrier brings the vehicle up to the high stratosphere, about 50,000 feet. And then the spaceship is detached, falls for a moment or two, and then lights engines and ascends to space. and then comes back. And this is a picture of a test flight just a couple of years ago. They had a very involved test flight program. They actually did kill one person, one of their pilots. In that, they had an accident that tore one of their vehicles apart. But to their credit, they stuck with it. They could have walked away, but they made it work. And as a result, this is the spacecraft that I actually flew on. It flies out of southern New Mexico at a spaceport built by the state of New Mexico with economic development funds, not very far, basically halfway between Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Truth or Consequences. I always thought that there was a certain irony in doing spaceflight, which can be dangerous, near a place called Truth or Consequences. That's where they built it. And there you see in the upper left, just a picture of New Mexico for all of you foreigners who are here. So you know where that is. Just below that, you see an aerial shot of the main building, the hangar and training facility at Spaceport America, and the big cement apron around it. And then on the right, you see one of the spaceships coming for a landing at the runway that's there at Spaceport America. Now, I also want to talk about Blue Origin. It was started by a different billionaire. This guy started selling books. This funny company called Amazon, and now sells everything. Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos, many of you may not know this, but he's been a space fanatic since he was very young. And he actually ran his the L5 chapter for Princeton when he was there as an undergraduate. And he went off and made a lot of money doing something completely different. Started this company, Blue Origin, in the early 2000s, about the same time. They developed a completely different design. So there are no pilots aboard. It's completely automated. And it's basically a rocket with a capsule on top. This is what it looks like. On the right, you can see the crew capsule above the propulsion module. It's a single stage to space altitudes of 100 kilometers. It comes back on parachutes. And the capsule, you can see a little bit more detail on the left, has very large windows and can seat 6 individuals. And completely automated. There's no crew on board. This is an interior view of the cabin of the Blue Origin spacecraft, which is called New Shepard, after Alan Shepard, first American to fly in space. And by the way, that feature in the middle is not a card table. It's actually the escape rocket, which is not on top of the vehicle to pull it away, but it's a pusher engine, right, that goes off in the cabin, but with thrust directed, of course, downward to pull the vehicle away in an emergency. And they have had a very extensive test flight program too. Their launch base isn't in New Mexico, but it's not very far away. It's in West Texas on several thousand acres of land that Bezos bought. Very interesting. I went out there for the first time when they were very secretive. It was like literally 2009. And you fly to El Paso and drive 150 miles into the middle of nowhere. There's a little town, but it's 20 miles away. And you go up the road from the town. The town's got like 1 restaurant and 2 hotels, and it's called Van Horn. And then you drive to a certain mile marker and you look for a certain fence gate. And when you drive up to it, it's like something in a sci-fi show or something, right? Somebody on a speaker says, "Who are you and why are you here?" And if you know the passcode, the gate magically opens and you drive onto this futuristic launch base that's just over the horizon. You can't see it from the road, right? And this is Bezos's launch range. So this spacecraft is very different. It comes down on parachutes and then retro rockets and goes thud in the desert, where, as you saw, the Virgin spacecraft is a glider like the space shuttle. It just comes to a runway. Now, I want to come back to this theme I was talking about earlier, that space science has been all automated, with very rare exceptions of the occasional scientist who would fly on the space shuttle, or these days on the ISS. What commercial suborbital offers is really powerful because it offers routine access at dramatically lower costs, about 10 times lower costs than conventional robotic suborbital rockets called sounding rockets. Because it's frequent and routine, you can do many more things. But that wouldn't work unless it was also much less expensive. Because flying more often at high price is not affordable. But because they're 10 times cheaper and they can fly 10 times more often for the same budget, you can do 10 times as much. And that is game changing. What it opens to us are many kinds of new science that we couldn't do. Some of them are called large N samples. Like instead of having, as NASA does today, 6 or 8 astronauts per year fly to space and they could take biomedical data on them, these suborbital spacecraft fly 6 or 8 people every time they fly, many times per year, and you can get data on hundreds of people going to space and their physiological reaction. That's just one example. Or to go back into the upper atmosphere on a routine basis that you can't afford to do with the expensive robotic spacecraft. Or to have microgravity during the zero-G portion, not for tens of seconds like you can get on an airplane, but for hundreds of seconds on a suborbital spaceflight. And it's great for astronomy and many other applications. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more right here. Here's a list of fields that can benefit from this revolution, really, in space access. It makes it much more routine and makes it much more affordable. And you can see all those different fields. And I expect we go down the road another 10 years where these vehicles are flying at very high flight rates, literally thousands of flights per year, that it'll really be a revolution in all the space science fields. Because the very best application is not that you can have 10 times the microgravity, or you can go back very often and get large N samples, or any of those other things. The best application is you can replace the automation and do the experimentation by the researchers, because it's so much simpler. People know how to conduct their own experiment. As I said, if automation was so great, every university and industrial lab would be automated, but nobody does that. You can't find automated labs pretty much anywhere. As soon as we can send researchers, people like myself, like Bob, to space, they know what to do, just a little bit of training for the space flight. And then you can get rid of all that design and all that complication that comes with automating everything. And all the failure modes that come with automating things, because humans are very adaptable and can quickly say, well, that's not what I expected, but I'll do this differently here. And I learned some of those lessons in a single space flight. And I can tell you about those. It's not part of the talk, but if you ask, I can tell you about that. So way back in 2010, which itself sounds like science fiction, to me it is. My firm, the Southwest Research Institute, agreed to start an internally funded effort to put us at the forefront of this coming new era of commercial suborbital spaceflight. And this is our little patch from that. But basically, we have an internal research program that you can propose to. And as a part of my startup package, taking a job with the firm, I said, I want to fly in space and I want you to fund it. And I will lead us to being at the front of the industry. And they believed in that. It was a more detailed story than I just told you. And then wrote a check for $1 million to go buy some tickets to fly to space and to build some experiments and to train some scientists at Southwest, myself and a couple of others. Now, at that time in 2010, we thought that Virgin and Blue would be ready to fly probably by 2013 or maybe 2014. We had no inkling it would take another 10 years. Well, we selected, in addition to myself, Dr. Dan Durda and Dr. Kathy Olkin to be researchers who would fly. We got experiments designed, we got experiments built. We took all 3 of us through a whole bunch of training, and then we had to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait until the 2020s, when it really became a going concern. But along the way, we proposed to NASA to test these vehicles to see how well they can do astronomy from space. And our first proposal was accepted. And as a result, we, with myself as the principal investigator, were selected to be the very first company to fly a NASA research flight on a commercial space flight with our own employees flying. And that selection came in late 2020. And it took a couple of years, but by 2023, we did it. The first space flight that we decided to fly was in advance of the NASA mission, one NASA's fund. And that was to fly me on what we call a training and risk reduction mission. Meaning that we would try to make sure that when we flew the NASA flight, the probability of success was higher because I wouldn't be a rookie experiencing all the sights and sounds and accelerations and just the temptation to look out the window and everything else when you really should be getting your work done. And keep in mind, these space flights are very brief. I said it was 75 minutes launch to landing. Most of that was on the big mothership motoring around in the atmosphere. From the moment we were released until we were in space was 63 seconds. And then we were weightless for 3.5 minutes. And after that, you had to be in your seat for reentry, 5 Gs, and then down to this gliding landing. So it's all over like this. So you don't have very much time to make mistakes. And so we put together a set of objectives, 9 objectives for this training and risk reduction flight. They were very carefully thought out to help the second flight be more successful. 9 objectives, 6 we call our minimum success criteria. You have to accomplish all 6 of those, or you can't say the training flight was a success. 2 more, 8 in total, that we call full mission success, if you could get that done. And then 1 bonus objective, the 9th one, which was really a get-ahead task for the NASA flight. And those 9 objectives are listed in that table there. And yes, they include in them, which one is it? Number 3, flight objective number 3, retire or mitigate overview effect distractions. Basically, that means get it out of your system, look out of the window. So that when you're working for NASA, you're not tempted all the time. Holy man, what's that? That's the Earth, right? So I got paid to spend a little bit of time looking at it, at the Earth. But most of it was truly very well thought out. How do we reduce risks for the NASA? I'll give you one example. I'm carrying around a pretty big camera for NASA, an image intensified camera. It's about this big. And you hold it in one hand and you have to translate with the other hand and stabilize yourself as you go from window to window to do your different astronomical observations. So we carried on a mock-up of that camera, exactly the same size. And I practiced in spaceflight maneuvering along with one hand. And I learned a lot in doing that, especially when the reaction control jets were firing and the whole thing would move right in real time around them. So 9 objectives. We did a lot of training for this. We tried to take as many of the unknowns out of it as we could. So we flew in very high performance jets on afterburner with up to 6 Gs on ascent to simulate the ride to space. And then we cut the afterburner at 30,000 feet and push the stick all the way over, and you'd be weightless for 30 seconds before you dive back down in the pattern and do it again and again and again and again the same morning, and do that over and over and over. We flew in altitude chambers. We flew in zero-G aircraft. We did a lot of just ground practice runs. And the idea was to try to make it as routine as it possibly could be in terms of understanding the experience, and we overtrained. So for example, when you fly Virgin to space, it's 4.5 Gs on the way up, it's 5 Gs on the way down. And I was flying centrifuge runs. These are the whirlybird machines that make the Gs. And we got the Virgin thrust profile and loaded it into the computer of the centrifuge. So you had exactly the same number of seconds you were accelerating, and then the same number of seconds to be on the rocket motor at full thrust, and the same exact pattern on the reentry as well, except we amped it up by a factor of 1.3. So instead of flying at 4.5 Gs, we fly at 6.5 Gs. And we do 5 space flights in a morning. And it's pretty strenuous. If you remember seeing Top Gun, the original or the sequel, and you remember those scenes in the locker rooms where the pilots are all sweaty and taking showers, it was kind of like that. Because you're just wringing wet at the end of flying 6 ascent profiles and 6 entry profiles in a morning. So there was a lot of this kind of training for all 3 of us. And then when we got real close, I started going down to spaceport in New Mexico. I wanted to watch some other Virgin flights. I wanted to be in the trainers, I wanted to be in the simulators. We did all that. And for any of you, I know Bob knows this very well. The 2 things that are the hallmark of spaceflight that nobody knows unless you're really in it is, first, there's a lot of paperwork. And secondly, there's an endless number of meetings to hash things out, how they're going to work down to the finest detail. And that's exactly what happened in preparing for the suborbital flight, is there was a whole bunch of paperwork ranging from contract negotiations, you know, through training plans and safety evaluations of all the equipment we flew, et cetera. And then there were, as you can see in the Zoom meeting, countless meetings to make sure that we had all the aspects of this and all the off-nominal procedures and all the ground integration of the hardware and how we would test everything beforehand and who would do what and when and what kind of ground support and what would be happening in flight, post-flight, pre-flight, everywhere. Just lots and lots of flight preparations. For me, I pretty much from August to the beginning of November of last year, this became a huge activity in my life. A bunch of back and forth to New Mexico, off to the centrifuge in Philadelphia, off to the 0G airplane, and practicing every day exactly what we'd be doing in flight. Meanwhile, having all these meetings to get all the documentation procedures ready. And then you go down to New Mexico 4 days before and you enter basically 100-hour curriculum to learn to be a crew member on the Virgin Galactic spacecraft, not a forward cockpit crew member flying the vehicle, but a backseater like I was when I flew F-18s and F-104s and F-15s and other aircraft. And they put you in a cool looking flight suit. That's amazing, right? And you get to design your own patches, and you get to pick which country's flag goes on your shoulder. There's all kinds of people from all over the place fly. And that's myself and Kelly Girardi, who was another researcher on board the flight, not flying for Southwest Research, but for another firm, actually a Boulder-based firm. And then it came to be flight day on November the 2nd. And the cabin crew for the flight are the 4 of us that you see there in the top. On the left is Ketty Maison Rouge, who is a space tourist flying on Virgin. And she was great to work with because we started meeting with her 2 months before the flight to impress upon her that we were not there to have a peak life experience, that both Kelly and I had a lot to get done in a very short amount of time. And we had to choreograph where she was going to be to make sure we weren't bumping into each other, having any surprises at all. But Ketty Maison Rouge was the space tourist. And then you see myself and Kelly Girardi, and then our flight instructor, Colin, who had already flown to space twice before. This was his 3rd space flight. And on the early flights, Virgin was flying the flight instructor, even on the flight, not just for ground training. And then here you can see my flight checklist for what I had to do. There's a lot of acronyms and mumbo jumbo in there, but basically you'll see those rows. It's basically what I had to do every 20 seconds from the time we got to space until we had to strap in for reentry. And what my tasks were, and some of them were color-coded. We practiced this over 150 times. And we refined this checklist over and over. We got better and better at finessing and exactly how everything was going to work. And you can see in the lower left, I wore it over my flight suit on a big cuff, so I could just glance at it. And then I had Colin calling out what time it was. I was wearing a chronometer, but to save time from having to focus on looking at the chronometer, Colin would call out 0, which was main engine cutoff, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 seconds, 80 seconds. And I pretty well had this all memorized because I'd done it so many times. And so I could judge from if I was on time or a few seconds behind throughout the flight. And if I got everything on this list done in those few minutes, then all 9 objectives would be accomplished. And then on November 2nd, we launched and we did this. After all the training, real early in the morning, we got there, got medical checks. I don't know really why they need to do that, but I mean, it's a little bit over the top. But we got strapped inside the vehicle, and I'll show you a video of the flight in just a few minutes. And then once everybody was ready to go and the hatches were sealed, and we did all the pressure checks and everything, we took off on down the runway about 9 a.m. After we got up to altitude and did the checks there, they released us. That's us being released. And almost immediately, the pilots hit the gas, turn on the engine. You accelerate very quickly, horizontally, until they go supersonic. They pull the stick back, the vehicle goes vertical, and then you just ascend to space in a space of about 1 minute. It's real fast. And it's a spectacular experience. And as I said, at 4.5 Gs. So you really feel like you are being shoved up away from the Earth into space in a big hurry. That was, for me, the rocket ride was the very best part. Way better than looking out the window. And then here are a few scenes from on board. You already saw the picture in the lower left, gives you an idea of the altitude. I will say, this is a wide angle lens, so it exaggerates the curvature of the Earth, which is very distinct and it's very 3D, and you know you're flying over a curved planet, and the flat earthers are wrong. I should say. But this is a little bit exaggerated. And I'll tell you, my thought when I looked out the window the first time from space, that was one word, that the scene in front of me was just vast. And I had never before from an airplane seen anything like that, where you could see the whole western half of North America. Maybe not North America, but the western half of the United States. Pacific Ocean, you know, from the Mexico all the way to the Pacific Ocean down to Mexico. Look in the other direction, you see the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, and then way up north past Colorado into Montana. It's really amazing. And there's a scene from inside the cabin, and you can see that I'm translating with one hand and holding this black camera mock-up with the other hand. You'll see it better in the video how it works. And in fact, the video might be next. I think it is. So it's just going to play. You have to start it. And I'll narrate. This is a Virgin video that they made for PR purposes. But here we are, pre-flight that morning, getting ready. And when you get out to the vehicle, you put on your parachute, your survival gear, things like that. And then they call it step. You walk out to the spacecraft, they take a few pictures, they put you in the vehicle. You get strapped in, 5-point harness into the comm system, etc. And then 20 minutes later, we're running down the runway. And here we are up at altitude, about ready for release. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release, release, release. And then just you drop. And you feel it's like you jump off the diving board. In 2 seconds, the rocket motor lights, you can see the orange flame reflected off the vehicles. And then you turn vertical and you were headed straight up to space. And it's really quick and it's really fun. And it's not all that loud. And then as soon as the engine cuts off, you're up at altitude, you can unstrap your weightlessness. I've got a whole bunch of things to do in 3.5 minutes to do it, move from place to place, get these different camera views, evaluate the translation capabilities with one hand, things like that. And before you know it, you're over the top of Apogee and you're already coming back and they say strap into your seats. And then back to Earth. And this is part of their PR video. And that's Dan Durda, who's another one of the flyers in our program. And then some scenes on board the spacecraft and out the window. And then I think they show landing next. Let's see. I don't quite remember what else it is. Training in aircraft and things like that. as our pilot. Just an amazing experience. And by the way, we got 9 of 9 objectives. So that worked out great. And this is landing. And then they eventually tow you back where the crowds are. And we had a whole bunch of work colleagues there and family. And of course, everybody wants to take pictures. And whoops, it just restarts this, doesn't it? Oh, there you go. So that's just one of the many pictures we took with my flight after the flight. And all I can say is I'm so looking forward to go back. And I'd like to go back and do this a lot because it really wasn't all that hard. And it was incredibly fun, incredibly addictive, incredibly pleasurable, and really fulfilling. And the promise of spaceflight with researchers doing their own research is just going to be amazing. It's the only way to go. And now we can't do that for missions like to Pluto. We can't send humans for a long time. But for stuff that's at low Earth orbit altitudes, that's going to become pretty routine. Virgin is now building a new generation vehicle that can fly more people and fly much more often with much quicker turnaround times. And Blue Origin is considering building a 2nd generation vehicle. And meanwhile, they're doing launches all the time. And the pace is going to pick up. There's going to be more and more of this. And it's going to be really the coming thing, I think. I think before long, you'll see graduate students doing their PhD research in space, researchers going into classrooms and saying, well, on my space flight last week, here's what we did, and inspiring kids to STEM education in a way that we really couldn't when all we could do is talk about working in mission control. So that's the story of my first space flight. I'm going to be flying again on that NASA flight and probably at least one more flight after that, suborbitally. Looking to put together something that's an orbital program a couple years from now. We'll see if that works out. It's more expensive. But that's what I came here to tell you about, and I'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
In your flights, were you able to make suggestions and say, this is what we need to do from this flight, this is how we should change things, this is what we need to test in the future? Were those first flights helpful in that way?
You're absolutely right. We wrote a lessons learned document and compiled something like 60 different recommendations to Virgin and to ourselves. And there were big things like the way they could have trained us better or anticipated things better or do things differently. And there were little things. For example, the morning that we flew, it was very cold. And so when we were out on the tarmac for 40 minutes, they hadn't provided any of us gloves, right? And there really aren't pockets the same way you would think of on a flight suit. So we actually it was so cold after a while, we got back in the vans and just waited, wearing our parachutes and everything else. It'd be real simple to just have gloves out there on a cold day, right? And so that was one of our lessons learned. But like I said, we actually briefed Virgin on the whole long list of them in gory detail and gave them the document. And a lot of them were for our own purposes, so we could do better on the second flight. Who else has a question?
Hi, Alan, this is MJ.
Where they drop you. How high are you?
About 50,000 feet. It's not the same every flight. On our flight, it was 47,000 feet. Sometimes it's 51,000 feet. It really depends upon what's called density altitude, not true altitude. So it varies by a few thousand feet, flight to flight. Bob.
Alan, this,
Why are windows in such a weird pattern? And two, the door is so small, how can you really get out with a parachute?
Yeah. So, okay, windows and doors. So the windows were designed so that this was designed for space tourists. It wasn't designed for researchers. And what we're basically doing is trying to make a tourist vehicle work for research. And in the future, I expect they'll have pure research vehicles, just the way that, for example, Boeing builds cargo and passenger versions of every 7XX airplane. But the windows were placed for the tourists so that ergonomically, whether you're tiny or big, and whether you, so you have a great view, basically, no matter who you are. And that's why they're placed the way they are, and that's why they're the size they are. If you have to bail out, there's an explosive hatch that they can blow, and you just jump through it. And we practiced that many times of lining up and jumping through the hatch onto a foam pad. Of course, you would really be free falling, but the parachute system they use, an oxygen mask system, is all completely automated. You don't have to have any parachuting experience. In my case, I've done a bunch of parachuting, and I've taken ejection seat school for F-18s, Pensacola Naval Air Station, water survival schools, all kinds of things. But they just teach you to jump at the hatch, and the system should take care of you from there.
Where's the
Theoretically.
hatch? Where is the hatch? Not the one you crawl through, but the emergency.
That's the same, one and the
Same
same,
one.
same thing. Normally it's opened and closed by humans on the outside,
Yeah.
where they have to turn wrenches and lower it. But from the inside, we can blow the hatch and it's jumped through it.
And no problems wearing the parachute in that small area.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked as far as practicing just jumping through it onto a foam mattress, right? But of course, when we did that, we did it with the timing being simulated, and the vehicle was shaking a little bit, the simulator. But you can't simulate things like the wind noise and the buffeting that you're going to get the minute you get in the airstrip. So they did a lot of computer simulations of that with very sophisticated aerodynamic models and some wind tunnel tests with dummies. But nobody's ever actually able to bail out of all these vehicles. Yes.
Any after effects when you were back on solid ground? Did you feel any different, even given all that training that you've been through?
Other than wanting to go right back. I thought it was a lot easier. I was glad that we'd overtrained. That it was a lot easier all around than I expected. I had done a lot with high G training, and I don't think a lot of it's really necessary. We overtrained, no question. I'm glad we did, but for people, the future is going to be about researchers flying very often. And so when you've done 5, 10, 20, 30 space flights, your recurrency training is going to be a snap by comparison. You're mostly just going to train them whether the operations you have to do for that flight. You don't need to keep going back to the simulator for G forces or fly on 0 G. Yes, sir. One of each.
So, what are all the things that are going on at Spaceport?
What are all the things that are going to Spaceport America?
Yeah.
Virgin's the big customer for them, the most prominent because they're flying humans. But they have quite a number of other companies down there. They have rocket companies. They're testing rocket engines down there. They have a very high-tech new launch system called spin launch that it actually uses electromagnetic acceleration up to 10,000 Gs. That's for launching cargo to space because no human could take that, and really circuit boards and avionics couldn't do it either. But if you want to launch fuel and water, which is most of the mass that people want to launch to orbit, that might be someday a viable. They've tested it many times, but no to orbital altitudes. They've been doing test shots with their Mark I system that goes to 35,000 feet. What was the other part of your question? Who else is working down there? There are some companies that do scientific sounding rockets on a commercial basis. They're down there. It's probably more that I don't know about.
Never heard of anybody trying to not have the overview effect. That's really a striking statement there. Well, he can do that, but just the idea that you try to avoid that. And the second part would be, did you learn anything about how difficult it will be for your NASA mission? Because I would assume if you're doing astronomy targets through the window, you gotta be somewhat dependent upon the pilot to make sure that he's orienting the spacecraft. I mean, do you learn anything about how difficult it might be?
Okay, that's a bunch of questions.
I know.
Yeah, I noticed that like when the president has a press conference, that each person that he calls on asks 3 questions.
I know.
That's just Leonard being a journalist. And my job, just like I guess President Biden's job would be, is try to remember all those questions
Yeah,
and not forget.
Yeah,
it.
boy,
The first thing you asked about,
yeah,
I may have given you the wrong impression.
okay,
It wasn't to avoid the overview effect.
yeah,
It was to recognize that if you've waited all your life for a space run, and then you go do your space flight for NASA, you're gonna be tempted to look out that window instead of just get your job done. So we programmed time on the training flight for
yeah,
me to just stare out the window. Okay, so that I kind of got that a little bit out of my system. It wasn't to avoid the overview effect. It was to get to experience a little bit of it. So that the next time you fly, you're not so tempted to do something that's not a NASA objective.
yeah.
Okay, so that was the first thing you asked about. What were the other 2?
Well, I forgot now, but no, the astronomy, you know.
Oh, yeah,
you
so
gotta-
let me tell you, the astronomy experiment is very well architected.
Yeah,
So this is actually cool, and it's why we won. So what we said was, you know, doing space astronomy from suborbital sounding rockets goes all the way back to the 1940s. And so we know it's very valuable. NASA's been paying for that with hundreds of experiments that have been launched on sounding rockets. You'd think that these human spaceflight vehicles could do some of that a lot less expensively and maybe more often. But when you think hard about it, how can you get the experiment compromised? Unlike a telescope you launch into space on a rocket, whatever you carry on Virgin Galactic has to look through the windows.
Yeah.
Now, so the question is, how good are the windows? Right? And the question isn't, what is the spec optical quality? Or what is the spec transmission as a function of wavelength? You can look that up because they told the vendor to build it to the spec, and then they made the vendor prove that they built it to spec. And that's gonna, but the real question is, what are the tiny micro flaws that can mess up your experiment? Little scratches and abrasions on the window from wear and tear. Films from the exhaust of ascent that you can never simulate in a computer. Glints off those wings that stick up, right? So we wrote a proposal that said, you really need to go fly and find out what all those minor effects are. So here's what we'll do. Classic scientific experiment. We're going to take a set of instrumentation that I was PI of that flew on the space shuttle multiple times and looked out the windows and did astronomy. We're going to take the exact same gear, fly it on Virgin. The only difference is shuttle window versus Virgin window.
yeah,
But we don't have to look at the same targets. We just have to look at star fields with different sun angles to accomplish the experiment. So almost wherever they're pointed, if we can see stars, we can determine if the image quality and the photometric depth is as good as it was on the shuttle. Maybe it'll be better. We don't know. Maybe it'll be worse. We're there to actually prove it. And so, but we have to also prove it for different lighting geometries, which is why for the NASA experiment, I'll have to get the 3 different windows to take data all in that short period of time. And that's why on the practice flight, I was practicing that route. And you asked about like lessons learned to do with this. They told us, don't be surprised when the jets fire, it's loud. It's like someone, like you have a pot over your head and somebody's hitting it with a spoon. Bang, 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 bang. They told us to expect that, and it didn't surprise me at all. But what did surprise me is as soon as the jets fire, the vehicle starts to pivot to a new attitude. Well, that's fine if you're like holding on to a handhold because you're attached to the vehicle. But when I would be flying from one side of the cabin to the other, and all of a sudden, bang, bang, and the place I'm going gets 5 feet further away. But I didn't expect that, right? Or it comes forward, excuse me, with a cough drop. So those were real lessons learned, you know, that you just I don't think you could anticipate, but as soon as you've done it, it's obvious.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what I should expect. Every flight will be different. And I've got to get used to the fact the vehicle's going to move around.
Huh.
Who else had a question? Yes, ma'am.
Got some questions online.
10 seconds of this,
Yeah, we're good.
20 seconds of this, that you forget your surroundings and you're just doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Iris always tells me I didn't look out the window enough. And she's right, you know, but I had a lot to do.
Yeah.
Okay, there are
Okay,
questions
we-
online.
Yeah, we have some
Are they-
Zoomers have questions.
Are they like written in a chat
we'll
or you
hear 'em.
ask?
They can unmute and they'll ask it and you'll hear it.
Okay.
MJ, you had a question?
Yeah, both David and I were at Spaceport America yesterday. And Scott McLaughlin, the manager, he's a former employee of mine at NOAA. He asked me to say hi to you today when you gave your talk. So hello from Scott.
Okay, thanks. I'll send him an email tomorrow.
And then Dan Durda also spoke at our Longmont Astronomical Society twice, and he's a compatriot of yours there. Has he flown yet?
No, I'm the only person to fly to space for Southwest Research so far. You may not know this, Dan at 58 years old became a father for the first time in February. And so he has said very strongly that he doesn't want to fly in the next 2 years because of family responsibilities. So too bad for me. He should have more babies.
Any other Zoomers?
I can have one really good Dan Durda story.
Okay.
None of you know Dan Durda, but this is such a great story. Oh, yes, okay, well, maybe you know Dan. So Dan is a perfectionist at everything he does and very experienced in aerospace in addition to science. And 10 years ago, we started going down to Florida to Cape Kennedy and flying off the shuttle runway in F-104 Widowmakers to do these high G training flights. And Dan had flown in F-18s in the program that I flew with. So we had to take a refresher course in the ejection seat. And so it was just the two of us and the instructor, who was this guy with a buzz cut that looked very marine. And he's teaching us, you know, here's how this part works and here's how that part works. And here's what's different than the ejection seat and the hornet and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, and the most likely ejection scenario is a flame out on takeoff. So if you eject right on takeoff, because there's no time if the vehicle is going to go down and crash in the runway, the canopy is going to blow, the rocket is going to take you 600 feet up and out of there, and probably you won't remember or even be aware of any of it. It's going to happen like that, and you're going to find yourself on a parachute floating down. And he said, I want you to look for that beach, and there are controls so you can steer on the parachute. And as soon as you find the beach, steer to the water. So pull on the side towards the water, which makes the parachute steer towards the water. And Dan looks at him and he says, softer landing, huh? And the Marine looks at him and said, fewer alligators, son. Oh, it's a whole other level of problem I could have. Okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
Were there other questions online?
Yeah, maybe if MJ or David Elmore, since they were just down at Spaceport yesterday, they could say a few words about what they saw there. I guess they did a tour. Maybe.
I don't know if anybody heard you say that.
Can you repeat it for us?
Yeah, so you're saying MJ and David Elmore were just down at Spaceport?
Yeah.
And maybe they want to say something about their experience there.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that Alan didn't mention is there's a 300-foot wingspan electric plane that has its own runway, which is gravel. And it is designed ultimately to go up at 60,000 feet or so for 6 months at a time and hover. I think its record altitude so far is 35,000 feet for 5 hours, but that's another ambitious project.
Yeah. Can you say surveillance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something we don't talk about.
Okay.
All right,
I think
thanks.
Mark had some videos or something.
Yeah.
Or something.
You're on the next generation orbital research conference, which Leonard and Carol and I have been doing for years. Can you say a few words about what, I mean, it's every 2 years, right?
Yeah, so this is,
Say a few words.
it's a conference we run in Boulder for this industry of commercial suborbital. Usually 300 to 400 people come, mostly researchers, some government people come, and some people, of course, from all the flight providers, meaning like Virgin and Blue Origin and some high altitude balloon companies. We usually have it at the Omni Hotel. It's in Broomfield by the Flatirons Crossing Mall. We've got a great meeting facility. We used to do it every other year till COVID, and now we've gone 3 years. And we're going the second 3 years. But it is really the premier conference for people who want to do commercial suborbital research, either robotically or with humans. And the next one will be very early in 2026, so about 18 months from now.
And Mark Kuchenreiter was there last year.
Yeah, great. Come back.
Yeah, your baby.
We've done 8 of them. We started in 2010,
Yeah.
and it's been 8 so far.
Okay, is that it for questions? Thank you, Alan. Okay, now, as I said at the beginning, we're now going to do a computer swap. Because that actually went pretty well there. So we'll do a computer swap, and then we have a video that Mark Peterson's gonna be showing. And then we have some stuff after that with Leonard, of course. So,
And John.
and John.
While you're doing that, I'll tell you what you're gonna see. Alan invited Carolyn and I to see his launch last November. Is that right? Yes.
November 2nd.
And so while you saw the Virgin Galactic video, very tightly edited with all the glamour shots, this is the nuts and bolts that we shot from the ground. So this would be more like the experience that you would have attending one of the Virgin Galactic launches. And it was a fun time.
Great time,
What's that?
a great time.
It was a great time. That's
Yeah, I
right.
can't say enough about how
Yeah.
Virgin Galactic people treated us. We were like royalty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Far different from what you would see like with a NASA press conference and sort of thing. This isn't open to the public, just to the invited guests. And I was kind of surprised to see how the Virgin Galactic people kind of focused on the families of the new to become astronauts. As you'll see, Ketty with her kids and Kelly with hers, and of course you with yours. And in fact, the walk of fame that we have at the beginning is just, your families are waiting there to congratulate you, wish you well on your way out to the runway, and then they're there to greet you on the way back. So it's kind of a whole different thing. And the other thing is, unlike the NASA astronauts, the Virgin Galactic ones don't have to do quarantine before and after. They're right there. Right? Yes, right. All right, so this is the video that I shot.
Quick question.
Yep.
You need them to hear the audio.
It's all pretty much irrelevant. It's just background noise until we get to the press
Right,
conference.
this is a new thing for us to try. My concern is that your audio level on the microphone for the Zoomers won't be loud enough to get over the.
Can you
crowd
turn
noise.
down the volume using your fader?
Well, maybe, I don't know how.
They might be able to hear some of it.
Yeah, you might be able to.
Yeah, I
Just
think
let it
they're.
go.
I'll speak loudly
There
in
we
your radio announcer voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, so
And if not-
So plenty loud online, and we're seeing Dewey.
Right.
all right,
We'll get to the movie in a second.
share screen.
Screen share.
I see the space plane, but that's the torso or whatever below it.
There it is.
Oh, I wonder how you got that.
Yeah.
I walked over that.
Okay.
Sometimes I couldn't hear.
Oh, you know what? I forgot to hit share audio.
Share.
I'll get the share sound right there.
On top is that thing.
Okay.
So if you can't hear Mark, go over the background noise and let us know.
All right.
Hey Dewey, online, we're seeing a green screen of like a desktop.
Thank you, John. I'll try to remedy that. All right. Share screen. Let's share screen number
We gotta
2.
share screen with audio.
Yeah, he knows that.
Okay.
Yeah, but when I hit share screen.
This is a little clearer.
There you go.
Okay, you got the
Yeah, there you go.
the video now at it's not moving yet, but
Go get started.
Roll them down.
you should be seeing that.
Yes, we have it. Thanks.
Okay,
They've got this really fancy LED walkway. Again, this is kind of glamorous for space tourists.
all right, let's roll.
Now, the Land Rover. So, as you know, SpaceX takes their astronauts to crash in Teslas, and Blue Origin takes them on Rivians. So Richard Branson has agreed with Land Rover to help us respond. So those are all Land Rovers. Inside. The concourse.
A lot of noise and get excited for your Galactic 5 crew.
Here we are all in that big concrete runway for a round spaceport. That's where you're going next. And here comes the mothership. It took off, so it winds its way up to altitude.
What are you shooting?
My phone. So again, they're circling around, gaining altitude. Yeah. By the time they're up there, now the Land Rovers come back in.
And we go inside.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's kind of chilly. So all we had, they set up big TVs out on the concrete so we could watch.
100 list of most influential people. Alan has previously served as NASA Associate Administrator overseeing space and Earth science. There's our crew right there. He is best known as the principal investigator of the NASA New Horizons mission to explore Pluto and the Kuiper Belt. Alan has served on numerous boards of space companies and is a member of the U.S. National Science Board, having published more than 500 peer-reviewed papers. Alan will operate a fluid cell that's designed to monitor the shape and location of fluid within a container to study fluid behavior in a low-gravity environment.
That's really tiny pure. So it's not surprising to have that. All right, so what you're gonna do? That's yeah. Yeah. Very. Right now, that is slowly a new vehicle. Oh, yeah. But they were going once.
Actually flakes off. Now we are in feathering position. As you see the wings feathered to 60 degrees. Feather is up and locked. There's Kelly doing her experiment, her fluid dynamics experiment. Alan in the back doing the same. They have just been given a welcome to space.
Sonic boom. There's Ellen. They basically do a big long loop and then land back on the runway.
Chase plane is there as one of our training aircraft. There you see it in the back.
Land right in there. So the Land Rovers take their way out there to the end of the runway. Up the tow bar. That's it. Indeed is a Land Rover. Yeah. That space
touch the outside. Nasty enough to touch it in a little while. On the inside.
What I expected.
That power their way in, there isn't power, so they get the door.
Is it utility your ones?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
First thing, yeah. Covered cancer.
To always strive for excellence, and I hope that all of us early founders who have been with Virgin Galactic from day one, from almost 20 years, we can in a very small way also inspire the next generation to dream big and always shoot for the stars.
Well, I can't even try to think, Kenny, I can't compete with that. That was beautiful. First thing I want to say is that all you guys got to do this. It's great. Where's Michael? Where's Kuzik? Where's Michael?
Way back here. Thank
Way
you.
in the back. You need to build a lot more spacecraft. And of course, I was applying as a space tourist, but as a researcher. And I think we're really opening doors to something really important. We're finally taking space research out of the realm of robots and letting people do the experiments they do, just like in every other laboratory and field environment on the Earth. And I can't wait for more researchers to fly like we did and accomplish their goals. And we were both batting 1,000 at the end of the flight. So I think with that, I want to thank my family for all their support. Of course, that includes Iris, and to the entire Virgin team, to the Southwest team, to Adam, who always supported something that was a little bit risky for us, was always behind it for more than a decade, stuck with it. Thank you all, and let's go get them. I'm ready for the next flight.
Echo what Alan said, SwRI and IIAS, you have opened up a brand new path to space for researchers, pioneering suborbital science, and I'm just left with so much gratitude for the Virgin Galactic team. I think all of you have made me feel over the years like such a part of the galactic family, and there's no one else I would want to fly to space with. And I'm just so grateful for all of you, the competence, the talent density, the mission drive at this company. Culture is something that's Michael, you're amazing, but culture is something that's not top down, it's bottom up, and it's you guys every single day, and you bring it. And I'm so grateful to the payload integration team, to the medical team, to all of you. So, and to my family, you guys, there were not a lot of people that believed in me in the beginning, but you guys all did, and here we are. Thank you.
I'm trying to get out of this. I know.
Okay.
You gotta get five.
Never got them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't hear any of the calls, anything. You know, not even get out of your seat. You know, I just doing cues, and I tried resetting the device while I was by. It still didn't work.
Okay.
Hey, man. This is the president of my local Explorers Club chapter.
Oh, hi.
Rocky Mountain Beach.
Yeah,
You met.
Yeah.
He's also here's the journalist.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we'll work on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what our apogee was?
286. Let me
I
look at
couldn't
it
hear
here.
the call, and so I have no idea what we did. All I know is it was a ball going uphill.
I got it right here somewhere. Hold on. 286, 630.
Yeah, we're gonna come back and have that.
Yeah.
286.
Yep. Feet. Yeah.
All right.
Highest point. 54 point. I can't do the math in my head.
That's all right.
54 point something miles. Yeah.
They say it's the only purpose-built spaceport in the world. Right now, they could host other companies, but Virgin Galactic is.
If we didn't open, Richard Branson dropped down on ropes and walked across the road.
Yeah.
They had a whole ballet for the.
So we get to walk around.
Can't do that as a team.
Not without a special.
Anyway, that's what it looks like from the ground.
Questions? Any Zoomers have questions?
Nope.
Okay, we're done.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Dewey.
All right, so John Astalos will be next.
See, where's the push button?
Yeah, hold on a second, though. I just have to get the setup here.
Yeah, Barb asked me to say a few words about some of the things that are happening in the sky.
Hey, Dewey.
Yeah, John?
Oh, I thought you had started sharing the screen. You haven't yet.
Not yet.
Sorry, man.
So you're about to tell me it's not sharing, right?
No, I would never do that.
All right, so anyone have it? This is. Yeah, basically forward and back. Yeah. Oh, slideshow. Not quite yet. I haven't started sharing yet. This is the thing I always forget. Share screen. Share screen too. So you don't have any audio, so I'm gonna share sound. Okay, it should be good.
All right. So here's the question. Who has a telescope here besides me?
Not too many, huh? Okay. Well, this is supposedly the best time of the year to be viewing, but did anyone look out a little while ago? And this is, you know, the amateur astronomer and the sky are always doing battle, basically, all for various reasons at various times of the year. And, but with a little planning, we can get some good observations and a little work that we can do things now that we couldn't do maybe 25 years ago. What?
Dewey.
Dewey.
Can you just hit the space bar?
Is the power on, is power on the remote?
Maybe not.
Yes, computer.
Space bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Power button.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There, that's
No,
It's still good.
you know what, every so once in a while I have found. It's probably still some. Me getting it off of.
That's hidden space.
if you could advance it, I guess.
Well, what I'm gonna do is stop it and restart it and then the clicker should go on. You know, that's the classic computer.
Yeah. But it's
Stop again.
green light isn't on.
Another flawless production.
Yeah, as always. Okay, so that's up there.
Should I give it a shot now?
Step it forward one, see if it goes. Did I turn it on?
I think you turn it off.
Yeah. you turned it on.
You're gonna want to point the remote at the computer too, not the screen. Just.
All right.
Can't tell,
Okay,
but
now I have to share screen.
Thank you.
So 1 second.
No, go ahead.
Okay, we good? Now it should go.
All right, let's give it a shot.
All right, plan B.
Plan B.
All right.
You want to advance it for me?
Is John Williams second?
Wait, just say next.
Send it to.
Oh, well, I built that telescope back in the 80s and I've gotten some good use out of it and I've made improvements on it. And it really does the job on a good night. But do you want to be observing on every night or just the good nights? Well, we have ways to go out during the good nights now. Next, please. Now, last September, I was lucky, but have a nice steady sky where I could see a partial occultation of Ganymede over the North Pole of Jupiter. And this is a stellarium screenshot. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Next.
By the way, it's working.
Oh, it's working now. All right. It was there. And I'm throwing some resources in, for instance, before we had our personal computers. With that telescope, I would just have to go outside on any clear night and hope for the best, but with planetarium programs, and this is just one of them, and weather resources like here's UCAR Wrap, you may have your own favorite. I use that a lot. And forecast. Is there a laser here?
No.
Okay. Forecast section, and it gives you can call up high altitude winds, jet winds, 700, 500, 300, 200 millibars, etc. And you can get an idea what the upper level winds are and get a determination how good the seeing is, for instance. And we have the sky chart. This is a little more generic, but there's a seeing indication there. The darker the blue, the steadier it is. So you can kind of correlate this and the last one together. And Sky Telescope is good. They have Jupiter moons, red spot transit times, et cetera, et cetera. But this year, we're fortunate enough to have transits of Titan going across Saturn, which only happens once every 15 years. And we have the ring plane crossing of Saturn and the Sun next March, which is really close to conjunction with the Sun, unfortunately. And since Saturn's orbital period is not in integer years, like 29 and a half years, it's always appearing a little different at subsequent ring plane crossings. But right now we can see, since Earth is a little bit out of plane with the Sun, as far as Saturn is concerned, we can see Titan. And on June 30th, this is the view. I actually saw it, and I could even see the shading at the edge of Titan. It was so steady. But when is it clear around here in the summer? What time of day? What time of night?
Not
Yeah,
right now.
And 3 o'clock. So it's actually, since Saturn is up near the meridian around then, that's a good thing. So we have to be hunting down the targets when it's going to be clear. And Barb asked me, "Did you get a picture?"
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get a picture, but Johnny Horn from Exo Sky and Telescope got a picture, and I asked him if I could use it because he's on Facebook and stuff. And it looked a lot like this, but I could see it better than that, actually. So I think I had a better.
Virginia, isn't he?
Pardon?
Isn't he viewing from Virginia?
He's in North Carolina, kind of close to the ocean, maybe 50 miles away, I'm not sure. But, you know.
He's still a wizard.
And also, here's a resource from Cloudy Nights, which is an amateur astronomy resource where they predicted a whole mess of different Titan transits. And towards the end of this year, there'll be Titan shadow transits. Now, I did get a week after that observation, I saw Titan coming out from behind Saturn. And that would be, you know, an occultation reappearance. So that was also very interesting. But these predictions are out there, and that stellarium I was talking about, the predictions are really pretty accurate. So you kind of plan ahead and try to see these things. But, you know, the weather's never exactly like you want it to be. What else? So I just, sorry, this one needs one of those. If anyone wants to take a picture of this, or I don't know if we're recording or not.
We are.
Yeah, this will be on there for those that might want to use resources like that. So that's basically all I had, but you know, would like to remind people to try to get out, and unfortunately, it's not always clear when we come up here. So we have to be.
Well, that's why.
So anyway.
Pop-up start.
Yeah, no,
That day
totally.
before.
Yeah, and you know, you got about 12 hours notice sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's all I had.
Okay, thanks, John. Anybody have any questions for John? Zoomers?
I have a question for John. I have a question. Hey, this is John. What
Yes,
kind of, what kind of lenses were you using to see what you were seeing? And, you know, can you kind of run through that setup and?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was using about 480 power on Saturn. And I have a microscope objective that I add to the telescope where the eyepieces actually match the microscope objective. And I don't think too many people are doing that, but it really helps my setup. It's like a $1,200 Nikon objective that I got on eBay for a lot less, $300. So it was brand new in box. So yeah, that helps a lot because most commercial eyepieces have so many air to glass surfaces that you get a lot of scatter. And this is better, but we could go on and on about that. Dewey's looking at his watch, so.
Oh, I just said, when is the ISS flyover?
It's 9:13.
You're not gonna see it.
Yeah,
Sucked in.
last time I looked, it was cloudy, so, yeah, I'm not trying to push it, I'm just wondering when that.
Did that answer your question? John
John?
Williams?
Yeah, it kind of, yeah. It's something I'm not. Well, I can't quite, I could maybe do it, but I may have to try.
Yeah, you need at least 200 power, 250 on stat. More the merrier if the seeing holds up.
All righty, then that would bring us to Leonard.
Quickly. Only a major amount of stuff happened. That's a big anniversary going.
All right, let's get you. Get this up. Share the screen. I think I'm actually getting this down here. Oh, I know one thing I'm gonna do.
Don't brag. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have faith in you, Dewey.
Okay. Yeah, we've actually been doing the audio for this on the speakers on the computer, and I forgot to change it over to the speakers for the TV. So that's what I just did. So now, John, we hear your voice coming out of the TV. Share that
I
screen.
need to use my radio voice.
All right.
What do I do?
Yeah, I think that
Hit it?
arrow should work. Let's find out. Fingers crossed.
No.
You could do it with his baseball.
Oh, well, tell me when to change.
Next slide.
Oh, okay.
I'll do
Go
it.
ahead. Hit it.
I said, hit it.
There we go. There you go, 55 years ago, this happened. Today, incredible. Still alive to think about it. It's pretty wild. Next thing.
Did Nancy have a statement?
Huh?
I think it's like a Nancy.
I don't know. I think it's one of the least observed Apollo anniversary I've seen myself. I got this picture the other day from the UN, and Buzz gave a talk to the United Nations about the future of space exploration, but he looks great. He's 90. What did we come up with? 94? 94 and a half today. Yeah, whatever. But anyway, he's doing great, looks great, seems to be together, and hope he's around for the. Well, let's see if he can get to the 60th. Okay. Next thing.
Clicker's working if you want.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is a big controversy right now. The NASA canceled the Viper, which is a almost, you can't even pronounce what Viper stands for, but it's a pretty amazing piece of machinery built mostly at NASA Ames Research Center. But, you know, cost overruns, NASA the other day, this was a big surprise for quite a few of the lunar exploration people. So we're not going to be able to see this rover on the moon. And it was supposed to fly on top of a private lander by Astrobotics in Pittsburgh. And this is part of the NASA private commercial lunar program. And so this was a big disappointment. And what the outcome of this is not clear today. I mean, even this morning, there was quite a lot of chatter about petitioning Congress, trying to get the money to do it. So we'll see where this goes. But right now, the option is to gut. This thing was almost totally out of all the environmental tests, and it was pretty well built and being tested, and so it's a big disappointment by the people that built it. But the key thing that I think is the missing element is that what it was supposed to do is look for water ice on site at the South Pole. That water ice is driving a lot of exploration interests by both the private sector and the government and other countries that are very interested in going to the South Pole, because that's where the water ice perhaps is, and you can convert that into oxygen, drinkable water, rocket fuel. It's all the buzzwords that you can think of trying to transform water ice at that location. So, and it also means permanency, or at least attempting to get some kind of capability for sustained human occupation of the South Pole of the moon, to create something like an Antarctic base. Anyway, that's a big controversy right now. It's being not totally forgotten that we need to know more about water ice. So there's a spacecraft that's being put together by Lockheed Martin, run by, this is Caltech, if I remember, Bethany Hellman. Yeah, and so this is going to supposedly fly this year. We have any more info on that? Bob, you up on that one? No, could go this year. But it's an orbiter, and it's going to go with some special equipment and look for water ice on the South Pole. It should give us some more data about what we don't understand about the water ice. So that'll be a flight coming up. South Pole Science, we also, this year, they got another intuitive machines spacecraft that's private sector. NASA has put money into this, and it's carrying going to the South Pole. They just announced the other day, they think they got a landing locale that they want to land this, and it has all kinds of stuff on this thing. It's it always looks good on the press kit. A lot of robots flying off this thing if it lands successful, and some of them, one of them will go down into a permanently shattered crater and perhaps understand more about water ice. So we're on the water ice trail for sure. Bob's got a mission before that.
1 of 10 payloads.
One in 10 payloads, and that's called Firefly, and we may see this thing before the year's end as well. Now that's not going South Pole, that's going where?
Going to Mare Crisium, which is one of the volcanic plains of the moon. You can see it with the naked eye, pretty distinctive if you know it. It's a little dot by itself on the.
Okay. So if everything goes, we can look and see your experiment on it.
Right there.
Right there.
Right in front of you.
Okay. All right, this is an interesting saga that's evolving. Not sure where it's going to go. This is the Boeing, Starliner, or Starliner. I always get Starship and Starliner, but anyway, Boeing's in trouble on this. They're not quite sure it had a lot of problems coming up to the space station. 2 people are on board, and there's a lot of problems with the propulsion system on there, and they're not quite sure they can use this vehicle to bring the crew back down. So we'll see where this is going to go. It could be that the Dragon by SpaceX may come up and be used to bring the crew back, but nobody knows for sure what's going to happen.
Is that inside information, Leonard? Because every press release says it's perfectly safe to bring them back.
That's right.
Plenty of hydrogen.
Right.
Or helium, thank you.
Yeah.
And we're just testing everything we can.
Right.
While we're up there. You don't believe that?
I believe it all, but I'm just saying that there's a problem.
Well, you're just fomenting the alarmism by saying that they're stranded.
There's something wrong with the spacecraft. There was something wrong with the spacecraft going up. There's something wrong with it now. There probably will be something wrong with it coming down. And you got 2 people in there. And if they kill 2 people, you might as well kiss a lot of stuff off. So this is danger. This is you know, at some point, we're gonna need a rescue service for trapped people and space tourists and private space stations. So this is a good, for instance, problem.
First Falcon 9 is grounded for a while.
And Falcon 9's grounded until the FAA goes, but yeah, I'm not an alarmist, but I'm just saying there's some issues here that are fascinating. And yeah, NASA's gonna go to the nth degree. They let a contract out to SpaceX for $300,000 to come up with a plan. Not supposedly for rescuing these people, but they've asked SpaceX to, they have a month to put a little study together. So I don't know if that's alarmist. Anyway. One of the things coming up in space.com, if they ever get around to it, I wrote a thing about how the CIA back early in the late 50s went into a pavilion that came to America. And this is the early the Soviet Union's Lunik spacecraft with a rocket stage, plus there was a spacecraft inside. The CIA at night went into this thing and actually gutted it and took it apart. And they found labels in there, and they were able to identify production companies within the Soviet Union that built this thing, because we were very panicked about the future of the Soviet space race. But anyway, it's a great story. And for instance, I just happened to find this thing after hours and hours of research. This is the picture taken of the exhibit in New York. And this is where the CIA came in at night and took it apart, put it back together again. The Soviets were supposedly not, they didn't have any clue that we didn't. But it's also the anniversary of Comet Shoemaker Levy 9. 6 days in July of 1994, we had a head-on collision with Jupiter and a comet. It broke up and impacted. I think Barb and I were at the, where were we?
Space Telescope Science.
That's right, yeah. Unbelievable night when this happened. And Carol, do you want to say anything about this? Anything? No. You probably covered that big.
I was in Florida that week, so.
Oh, okay. All right. This is another one of those alarmist things, but we have a space debris problem. I just want to remind everybody that we're, as my mother taught me, cruising for a bruising. Something's going to come soon, I think, about space debris and what are we trying to do to try to regulate it. My guess is we're going to have some kind of tragedy up there, and then everybody will get more animated about it. But there are some new proposals that are being suggested about picking up debris and trying to put it, you know, in a safer orbit or get it out of the way or re-enter it or whatever they're going to do. But the problem is space debris comes in all sizes, all shapes. No one solution is really going to solve this anytime soon. So we're going to be living with space junk and space debris for quite a while, as we have been. And okay, this was on, I don't know if anybody saw this. This is kind of an interesting, kind of got confused at the end, but it was very interesting. If you get a chance to see it, it's running now on Max and HBO. But it's about, it starts out with two private companies against each other and what's going on with Peter Beck at the Rocket Lab and then another guy from Astra. But, you know, they're trying to build launch vehicles and they're successful and then failures. And it's a pretty interesting upfront look at what happens in space entrepreneurship. And Michael, you want to explain this, right?
Well, there's probably no explanation needed. You can just enjoy.
So you painted this, or was it with computer or?
No, it's on canvas. It's a
Okay.
traditional piece.
And you're next, right, Barb?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, but what, so is that dinosaur tracks?
Yeah, it's a highly scientifically researched. It's a joke.
Yeah. Okay, and you want me to hit this?
Yeah, just go ahead and hit along. So, yeah, I just wanted to, one thing I thought that might help get our people to star parties, including Carolyn's that's a week, or this coming Friday, right? The first one, and then August 10. And this is down in Colorado Springs. This one of the, I've just got 3 of these, but one of the Colorado Springs Astronomical Society guys who, and this is quite a society on there. It's one of the best. What do you want to say, Carolyn? One of the best in the nation, in the world, or maybe John, I suppose, could say. But I just wanted to show a couple of these because I thought maybe that would inspire everyone to come to a star party. This is kind of cool. One of the other guys. This is down at the Broadmoor, so a nice background there too. And these guys do this one night during the space symposium. And a lot of these people who are involved with space, but some of them have never looked through a telescope. And then there's a ring too. And I can't tell you who these guys are, but they're pretty they're really great about talking to people. So I highly encourage everyone to go to Carolyn's star parties in Golden Gate Canyon State Park. And then we had met for 7 weeks, and I thought, well, this is great. We'll do a star party at the our Coal Creek Canyon K-8 school. And just every time we tried, the weather wasn't good. So that's why I want to have pop-up star parties. So if you're on our list, we'll let you know 1 to 2 days in advance. And when we know it's going to be a totally clear night. So we'll see how that goes before the weather gets cold. Thank you. Oh, and yeah, we want to.
Barb, and Leonard, it's actually 9 years ago, last Monday, we had the New Horizons flyby.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we better remember that, it was a thrilling experience.
Yeah. Especially for Alan.
All right, folks, I
All
think.
of us.
2000.
We talked on Pluto, and Alan has, and several other people who were really covering Pluto. And I was thrilled. I had a very small contract to do some lesson plans about Virgin Galactic and Spaceship Two, and one of them was looking down on New Mexico, from up there. And you got to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you for all you Zoomers who tuned in, and we're going to do a quick picture. And we'll put the chairs away after the picture. So let's do the picture thing
Thanks, Dewey.
first. All right, John, thanks.